Okay, so first of all, is everyone having a good time at the conference so far? Learning a lot?
Yep.
Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. This is the last session of the day. Your brain is getting to that point of saturation. So hopefully with my energy and possibly how fast I speak, that'll get you through that hump. All right. So thank you very much for attending the Business Process Reengineering with SharePoint Workflows. It is the then and the now. COM 105 is part of the community track. And the purpose of the community track is to bring real-world experience into the conference, to talk about what's out there, what we've seen, and how that will relate back into your world. If there's lessons learned that you can get from it, and also vice versa, in fact, what can I learn from you in terms of what you've seen out there? I like my sessions to be entirely interactive. Usually I don't want to wait until the end to get questions. As it comes up, let me know. In fact, sometimes my sessions will take different paths because people are asking questions. I say, is that what everyone here? Let's go down that path. So, please, respond. Let me know what's going on, and so on and so forth. So, who am I? My name is Fabian Williams. I'm a Microsoft Certified Solution Developer, Systems Engineer, Database Administrator. I am not an MVP, but I am an MVS. All right. Everyone here familiar with SharePoint, right? All right. Good. Okay. So. I have an MVS. I work with Planet Technologies in the States. We're a national service solutions provider. We do a lot of Microsoft and the entire stack. I focus on the SharePoint piece of it. And the company email address is there. I do blog. My blog is sharepointfabian.com/blog. It is on SharePoint 2010 right now. There's this huge conversation that was going on a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, actually. And people are talking about, should we continue with SharePoint 2010 as our blog site? And I think... Andrew started off with, they're moving back to WordPress, so this is going to change in like maybe a month or so to WordPress. But, that'll be a pointer. My email address is there, fabian@addotop.com. Feel free to email me. I usually get back to those questions. Whereas 140 characters can't do it enough justice on Twitter, so you can send me an email and I will answer it. And the Twitter handle is right there, which is my full name, Fabian Williams. So the warning may come a little bit too late, but it's still there. I speak fast. This is a byproduct of being Jamaican. I can't help that. But if I do start to see the glazes in the eyes, I will slow down. If you put your hand up, hey, Phil, I will slow down. I will not PILOC you, by the way. You know what PILOC means? So there will be demos inside there, spruced out just to make sure that you can, everyone's alive. And as I mentioned before, this is not a code session, but I will be breaking out Visual Studio. Just to show you as a part of the effort. Because again, this is all about what I have done on the project for BPR on a site. And it started out as a Visual Studio solution. And then I built on that, moving it forward. So I need to at least show you that so you can quantify what the effort is. So this is going to be our agenda. We're going to review the project flowchart. We're going to stop and talk about the requirements in the solution. We're going to look at what the 2010 approach is. I'm going to show you a little bit of a demo in terms of what I built out for that approach. And then I'm going to talk about why we went to K2. In fact, you saw me point at the gentleman right here as a K2 on his shirts. I know he works at K2. So he knows he's going to get a little bit of a hit, but it is a good solution. It's a good product. I like it. And then I'm going to do a demo on that K2 piece of it as well. Then I'm going to talk about the SharePoint 2013 and an Office 365 approach, and then a demo on that as well. So it's going to be the same solution. And the benefit you're going to see is that we started a coded solution, and we're ending back at something which you can term as out of box. And you may say, wait a minute, that seems contrary to best practice, because best practice always says, what? Start off out of the box, then tweak, and then when you can't tweak anymore, go custom. Which I did try, but the only reason why we're here in the 2013 is because you could not do it. You could not do it out of the box until 2013. All right. So let's start off with a review of the flow chart, and I am going to leave this up here while I talk about what the project is. So you can study this and listen to me at the same time. So the project is actually with a federal agency back in the States, and it's for the processing of grants. All right. So it's committed dollars. Congress awarded these dollars to be given away to interested parties, and right now, or before, they were using paper document, filling it out, emailing it from person A to person B to person C, and then running it through signatures, back and forth, and then eventually it would come to an agreement, and then boom, it's done. So they wanted to take that process, which sometimes took, I think they said the longest one took like around 4 months, shortest one takes 2 weeks, and they wanted to streamline that process. So they provided me with a flow chart when I went in, and the flow chart, they said, okay, here's our process. It didn't look like this, by the way. This is my flow chart. It didn't look like this. So I looked at the flow chart and I said, okay, fine, let's walk through, let's visualize it, put it on the board, let's walk through it. And we went maybe around 3-4 steps into it, and they said, well, no, we do it this way. No, we do it that way. So the flow chart that they gave me was not even representative of what their actual process was, which is not, it's not unfamiliar. But I will usually use that just to set a baseline with them and me as an understanding, hey, we need to have something that we're going to agree on. This is what you're telling me that is your process, but we already understand that it is not, which sometimes is a good thing because you want the truth. You don't want what they tell you, you want the truth. And maybe they have refined it because it works better that way. So, and which is always helpful to me because I don't want to build against a flow chart and they already have a process that would make it a lot better because then I'm actually taking them back, all right? So after looking at their flow chart and having had a couple of JAD sessions with them, we came up with this, right? So as you can tell here, there's a couple spots where you have some notepads that will take you all the way back. So it's not necessarily a sequential workflow as much as it is a state machine workflow if you're thinking in terms of workflow technologies. Or there are iterative nodes. So there's a node that can take you here, then you can go forward and the node can loop you back here, and so on and so forth. And you'll notice it's called Workflow 1A. That is because part of the process involved where you have nodes that could take multiple notepads. And this one here, I termed Workflow 1B, acronym WF1B. And this represents another piece of the process, but this was more sequential, all right? As you can see, everything will just trace back once and then move forward. You'll also notice that you have, depending on where you are here, you have back to Workflow 1, stop and restart Workflow 2, and end. All right? So I'm just going to talk through this here for a little bit. Workflow 1, as you can see, some of the actors that are in there is that there's a document that's created. The lead contact receives that document. They determine whether or not it can pass muster and move forward. If it's no, it goes back to the originator. If it's yes, a question is asked, is it ready for, if I can use my mouse? No, I can't. Is it ready for SAM approval? Then if the SAM needs to comment on it, it will comment on it, it will come back. Does it require any more comments? No, move forward. Assistant secretary gets it. Is it okay? If no, move it back over here, send it through there. If yes, move it down. The lead submits the document to SRD for clearance. And at this point, what's happening is that in this process, this is where an unknown amount of people will be included in this workflow process. So it goes through some approval with actors that are named. Then there are going to be actors that they don't know until that moment in time. And these actors are subject matter experts. All right? So we don't know who we need to approve it, but we know it's going to be a bunch of people. And there's no telling how much that amount can be. I think I've seen it where it's actually 30 people before. And here's the kicker. They all need to approve it to move it forward. It's not based on a percentage. It's not, they can't all say no, by the way. Remember, my initial statement was this is committed dollars. You must use it. So they have to all come back to a yes. And the workflow will continue until they come back to a yes or an escalation happens and somebody overrides them. But in the end, it must be a yes. All right? So once those people are identified, as it says right here, an unknown amount of approval, if they say no, then it actually goes down this path. Then there's an option to expedite it. If it's not expedited, it begins the other workflow. If it is expedited, it restarts this piece until they get to that yes. Once they get to that yes, then it goes through this process until it ends. All right? Does everyone understand that? We're all on board? Good to go. All right? So let's talk a little bit about the solution. So as I mentioned before, all process must adjudicate to a successful outcome. At the SRD steps, whilst the workflow is running, there's an unknown amount of actors. The reason why I say while the workflow is running is because if I was designing this and I knew ahead of time it was a finite amount, I could build that into the design. I can't if I don't know. It needs to grow or shrink to the amount of people that there is, and I need to be able to manipulate that loop process so that I can always count and say, okay, there's 10 people this time, loop through them, these 10 people, give them all tasks. Do I have 10 yeses? Okay, I'm good to go, move forward. If I don't have 10 yeses, keep waiting, all right? So that's just the logic process that I'm going through. And parallel approvers are allowed to be rejected 2 times before escalation. So remember I said they all need to be a yes. So for me, I told them, listen, I will go through 2 iterations. After 2 iterations, somebody needs to escalate this, somebody needs to answer this. The reason being, I said, is it'll get unwieldy. So we need the cutoff point, so we came to an agreement on that. That was actually me interjecting something inside their process. So at this point in time, I want to challenge the audience here. How many people, by show of hands, think, and by the way, this was back in November of, what is it, 13? November of 2011. And we're working on SharePoint 2010 on-prem. So these are this is our platform. I tell you this because I'm about to ask you a few questions. How many people here think that we can do what I've just said out of the box, either with the browser workflows? Show of hands. Out of the box? How? How could you do it? All right. The challenges that you're going to face is how are you going to manage parallel approvals and how are you going to manage loops?
SharePoint Design.
Which version? 2010?
2010.
All right. How? I'm sorry? Thank you. I know you can.
You can, but there's other ways.
All right. So to meet all the requirements I've just specified, whereas there's an unknown amount of people that you need to give parallel tasks to, I use those words because I knew that I will come back at this question. Because I've tried what you're saying. And even loops, you can do loops if you use another list, right? But that right there also is, because it's based on a timer service, it will miss. It will never do the same thing twice. So I've tried that. So how many people, again, think that this can be done? I'm leading you down this road, right? How many people think it can be done out of the box? All right. How many people think that with add-ins you could do this? And by add-ins, I mean custom work. You believe we can do custom workflow activities? Yep. All right. All right. So with custom workflow activities, how would you meet some of the challenges that I mentioned before? What would you do?
I would actually use one of the competitors of Mr. over there.
Okay, no, but that's a third-party solution, though. I said just add it. So what by add-ins, I mean, can you extend SharePoint Designer with a custom workflow activity to do that? All right. So does anyone here, do you know what I mean by custom workflow activity within SharePoint Designer? All right. Anyone not know it? All right. So let's talk about that. So, so custom workflow activities is basically the ability to create, it's an XML file, you build it in Visual Studio, and you build an action, the same action that you do when you click on in the tab inside SharePoint Designer. You can write modules that will interject that code inside SharePoint Designer, and you can use that as an activity inside SharePoint Designer. There are a couple of things around that, though, is that you can't send emails with it, which is when the question came over here and somebody said that, yes, you could. If you're going to assign a task, what do you need? You need an email to do that. So that will you'll be able to do some of it, but not all of it. So go ahead.
Wouldn't it be possible to do it with JavaScript?
With JavaScript? Yeah, you could do it with JavaScript, but then now you're writing client-side code and stuff like that. You're still writing code, all right? And I agree. There's a chance to do it in JavaScript. He's probably doing this because he follows me on Twitter. We do know each other, and he knows I hate JavaScript. And I'm just becoming a fan of JavaScript because now I have to because I'm doing 2013. So and he's probably seen me reading the books and talking about all my frustration learning JavaScript because it's not managed code. And if you can't tell, I'm a C# snob. So I'm working through that process. So what are we left with? What are we left with is a solution. And if you walk through those processes, now we've tried out of the box. We've tried let's extend the product via add-ins. Now custom code solution. So that's what I was left up with in terms of where we would take this, and the client agreed. All right, they said, "Yep, go ahead and do this." All right. So some of the design elements once we came up with that solution was as a developer. Whenever I build solutions, I always think about who's going to see this after I made my first release or after I made my, who's going to inherit this? Because I don't want that person berating me afterwards and saying, "Oh, look at what this guy did. Are you serious?" So I usually build it as if I'm going to be the person that's going to come back in afterwards. And to that end, and also as a deployment strategy, I always build my own fields, my own content types, and my own list definitions. Does anyone not know what those are? All right. So, the field types gives me control about what you're going to see when you open up your SharePoint list or library. The content type, I know what their process was. You know, they had a paper document that reflected what they collected as a part of that approval process. So I made that into a content type. And my list def is, all of this information is going to live inside a document library, right? So I wanted to control all of these infrastructure components because if I do it on my machine and I code it that way, you know what assurances I have? In their environment, it will absolutely work. Because if it works in my environment and I coded it, it will work in theirs. The challenge that some people do is that they will build things out because it's easier, inside their environment. And then they will hand it, which works, by the way. If you do that and then back up your solution and then restore it on their environment, it will work, right? Because it's this exact duplicate. But that is not really a good deployment strategy. If you try to redo your efforts over there, that I guarantee you will not work. Because the GUIDs, which is everything ties back down to in SharePoint, for everything that you're doing, will be different. And there will be pieces in here where I'll show you where I am dependent on a GUID being the same thing. So the first thing I do is create my site columns, content types, and my list definitions for my solution. The next challenge that I faced, which even though you heard me talk about the challenges in terms of how would I manage the parallel approval process, which is also a challenge in K2, by the way, inside my solution, is that Visual Studio provides you with a couple of things called a replicator activity. And you can also create another, I would still need a custom activity. So in the end, I needed a custom activity and I need a replicator activity to make this work. What those features are is the custom activity, I wanted to bring something down to a unit of work. And that unit of work, you'll see later on, is a task. I want to be able to create a task, I want to assign you a task, and I want to watch that task until it either approves or rejects, and then I want to clean up in the end. So it's task created, on task change, and task complete in terms of objects, right? So I created a custom activity that did that. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to be able to use that piece over and over again. And by creating it as a custom activity, I have an assurance that it'll do the same thing all the time. The replicator activity I needed because I wanted to be able to say, how many people do we have? 10? Replicate it 10 times. So that was my assurance for that as well. And with a combination of state machine and sequential workflows, we got the job done. So what I'm going to show you now, I'm going to jump out of this for a little bit. Hopefully my warm-up script work, and we are good to go. This is, I don't like the resolution, but there's not much I can do about that, guys. Let me open this up here. I'll go to full screen where I can, and I will talk through it. Luckily, we're not doing a code session, so it's just for the benefit of you understanding the pains and perils that developers go through. In the meantime, any questions? Everyone's on board so far? Everyone is in agreement with everything I've said? Really? I have a room full of people that agree. You're better than my client. I'm sorry? Is that what it is?
It's after 4 o'clock.
It's after 4 o'clock? All right. So I'm waiting for this to finish, and then I will jump into that. Come on. But what you're going to see, I'll talk through it. There's a file that's going to be called, it's a XML file that defines all of the fields. And the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to call out the nomenclature within the fields and some of the things that I need within those fields. Then the next thing I want to show you after that is the list definition that I created and the content type that I created. All right. So go away. Go away. All right. So let me bring this down here. All right. So some of the things that we're working with here, this is my content fields that you're looking at right here. And in the end, it'll make sense. In fact, let me open up the browser real quickly so that we won't have to wait on that. What you'll see when I go into the UI is that you'll see that those fields that I'm defining are used inside the UI. And I'll just minimize that in the meantime. So as a part of the process, again, when you're interviewing and you're doing JAD sessions, you're looking at these forms, and these are asset forms, and you're saying, okay, fine, you're asking for this question, this will become a field. You're asking for that question, that'll become a field. This field may be a choice field with answers that you're going to pick from. It may be a single line of text field because it needs you to supply some stuff. Maybe a date field. It may also be in most cases, for here, it's a person field because I am assigning these people tasks. So it's who you are, what you're doing, what information you're collecting, right? So the pain here is that it's a, who in this room has ever had the joy of doing this before? All right, a few of you guys, right? So you have to be precise in this writing, right? Because it's unforgiving. You spell something wrong, you do copy good and you chop off something and you wonder why it's not working, because so there's a lot of things that happen in this process that affects the development process. It's meticulous. It's not necessarily hard. It's tedious and meticulous work, and you have to do that for as many as they gave me, which was quite a lot when you see. So this entire file defines that structure for all of the different fields that I had to come up with and build out. Once we've done that, the next thing that I did was to come up with my content type. And the content type is a little bit easier because all you're doing there basically is, double click, is you're basically,
Scroll down to the bottom.
yeah. Oh, I'm at the bottom. Thank you. Didn't hear what you said. There you go. So thank you. It's a good catch. So basically, you're basically pulling the fields that you need inside your content type, giving it a name, and then pushing it out the door and telling what the content type is based on. All right. So this is a little bit easier. A lot of the heavy lifting is done inside your field definitions. All right. So I promise you that I wouldn't kill you with code. The last final thing is my list definition, which is built out here somewhere. There it is right here, my list definition right here. And that list basically absorbs the content type, which absorbs the field, so you can see how that's put together, right? So that's what you do in terms of Visual Studio, and when you're done, you basically have features that you deploy as WSPs to the environment, and boom, you have that solution available, all right? So I did that, and in the end, you had a solution. That looks a little bit like this, actually. All right, so here's the field def once you activate your solution. And if I come inside here and I click on, that warm-up script is really working, isn't it? Click on Documents, and I go to New Document Set, because another thing is that I wanted to be able to organize this information. And it was easier to organize it in a document set because it's one bucket with a bunch of metadata, and you can put anything that you want inside there. So as you can see, those fields came out inside here quite nicely. Some of them are required fields, as you can tell. The drop down, the choice fields, and a bunch of people fields. So as you can see, a lot of it is people fields. In this instance, remember that the question about is it ready for the review? Some yes/no fields inside there. And also some date fields inside there, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the UI. And once you do that, I'm actually going to show you what one looks like full. So these are a couple of testing that I was doing right here. You can see, the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie stuff. If you can't tell already, I have a military background, So I use a lot of that nomenclature in my testing. So that's where we are for Visual Studio, and that's what had to be done. Indeed, I'll actually say that as this process moved along and I needed to move it into K2 and eventually SharePoint Designer, that work that was done already actually benefits us, because I can actually say, okay, drop the WSP there, and then I can now use a K2 to say, attach to this library and start doing your work. Or in SharePoint Designer, you create a workflow based off this or this library and move it forward. Again, reuse of work is always something that you want to do, and by creating that environment in code allows me to do that. All right. So let's talk the SharePoint 2010 approach. So you already saw the UI, you saw the content type, you saw the list definition. The next thing that I needed to do was create my state machine workflow as necessary for the necessary stages. So again, you're boxing your things around it. So it needs to have we need to assign a task here. Who does it go to? This person needs to approve or reject it. What happens when they reject it? It goes back here. What happens when they approve it? It goes here. So you start to look at things in that approach and see how many rejection points there are. And if there are rejection points that point all the way back, if it's not a sequential path, then you have a decision that you've made where this can't be sequential. It must be state machine. Create my custom activity. I already talked to you about that for the parallel approval and sequential process. Incorporate the custom activity inside the sequential process. Code the workflow activities and the methods and custom methods and tests and more tests. The custom methods that were needed inside here are a couple-fold. One of the methods that I needed to build as a part of the process was the counter, right? I need to figure out how much people do we have inside of the parallel approval process. so I can know how many times, how many replicator tasks I need, as well as how many people have not yet approved this instance of this workflow. So I can know, do I need to keep the loop running, all right? So those are some of the custom methods. Another custom method I needed was, I needed to do escalation steps and other notifications that are not part of the task. So we use SP send mail utility, which is a .NET utility inside SharePoint that you can send out custom emails as well, all right? So let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so let's drop out and come back inside here. Open this up. And while that's going on, actually before I do that, let me at least get K2 Studio started because I'm going to come there next. And so once we've done all of this heavy lifting and we have those WSPs built out, then remember we saw Workflow 1 and Workflow 1B, right? So Workflow 1, we know, as I mentioned before, it's going to be a state machine workflow. How many people here have coded a state machine workflow before? Or at least been in a project where one's been used? Okay, a few, all right. So it's just a different template, and it builds out as such. It follows the logic that you saw from the flow chart, albeit in different naming schemes. But you have your activities and your task inside there. It follows all the way through. Remember, does it need approval? Goes over to the assistant secretary approval. If it's rejected, move back here. If it's forward, move there. And it goes all the way down until it ends right there, the state finish. Now, what I'm doing at this process also, I'm actually setting a flag that says, workflow 1 ended, and I'm looking in for the second workflow I have, workflow 1B, checks to see what that flag is so it knows to kick off. So once that's done, in fact, I want to jump and show you something. This is my custom activity. All right? So I built a custom activity that you'll see in the next workflow. And this is all the activity does, as I mentioned before. I wanted a unit of work that I could use over and over again, and I can just call that unit of work. So create a task, look at the task to see when it's changed. This is basically a while loop, looking to see is it 100% complete or not, and whether it's approved or not for it to move forward. What I want to show you, however, is some of the dependencies that I had inside there. So I'm actually going to view code just to show you. And you should always challenge your consultants, by the way, and your speakers. We tell you stuff and you just automatically believe it. You should say, hold our feet to the fire. But as you can see right here, the GUID is presented. So the task field. In fact, a part of this process, a part of the design, is that whenever you create a task as a part of a workflow, it actually adds the item to the task list, right? Yes? Not if you're with me, right? Yeah? Because it needs to track that task. So SharePoint already has this task list. And when SharePoint installs, the task is created, that GUID is always going to be that GUID. Does everyone agree with that statement, right? Yes? All right. So I know I was able to call that one. However, I need another field. So here, when I did my custom field definitions before, that GUID right there is the one that I created. And that's why I said I have a dependency of that GUID, which is, again, further reasoning why I need that. As well, other things down there that I'm looking at, I'm looking inside here to find out, set the redo fields, all right? So I'm looking to see how many people approved versus how many people rejected. For everybody that's rejected, I'm taking them out and I'm moving them into a redo field. Then I'm looking at that field and I'm setting new task again. And that's my logic to go forward and forward and forward. Again, I'm not here to teach you code. I'm here to show you the logic and the effort that's required on a custom solution. And it's actually a good setup for him because what his product does, K2, you don't have to do any of this. All right? So, and it works really well. So this all works through the process, and in the end, you have a workflow that gives you that. Oh, no, I did not show you the state machine one. Sorry, the sequential one. So those custom activities are incorporated inside workflow 2, 1B, in fact. And basically, let me just go full screen on this one. Full screen. All right, so basically, you have these you'll notice that there's locks on these right here. The reason that there's a lock is because it's a custom activity embedded inside my workflow. I cannot edit it here, but I can certainly use it here. So I'm using this custom activity, and it's also wrapped inside the replicate task. You want to see that? So I said, okay, what's the counter? Take this, blow it out, and then ask these people questions and so on and so forth. All right? And that goes all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down to the very end right there. All right? So it's an involved process, right? And this involved process takes time. In the end, it took me, I think, 4.5 weeks to build this out, but that's also going back to the well and saying, is this what you want? No, it's not what I want. Or I met into an issue and I say, I need clarification on this. So it's not like it was 4 weeks of just hunkering over the computer doing it, but that's the process that was required to do that. All right? So with that, let me jump out of full screen.
Did you have any issues?
I'm sorry?
Just a short question. Did you have any issues debugging your workflows on your development machine and then on the productive machine or on the test machine?
Right. So you wouldn't be debugging it on the prod machine because you certainly can't do that. But I didn't have any issues debugging in my world because you could set breakpoints inside here and then start the process. And in fact, that's how I tested to make sure it worked. I actually set the debugger and put something in the hopper and watch and break it and set the breakpoint and watch it walk through just to make sure it was managing my variables. And I met into issues with my replicate activity. I met into issues with my GUIDs because that was my part. I didn't do it right, and I was able to fix those. But it was, in the end, it wasn't a technical challenge. It was more developer error. That's what unit testing is for, right? All right.
How many requests did you get?
From the client? A couple of changes. So there were.
I mean, in your workflow.
Oh, how many? You mean quantify the amount of items going through? So you're talking for load testing, then, right? So I on a normal, it's not normal, so I shouldn't use the word normal. And I can't give away the client, even though you probably can see some of the names inside the code, but I can't say it out loud. It's cyclical. It's cyclical. So there's a time of year where it just gets heavy, where they're getting like hundreds of transactions a day. And then there's a period of time when there's none, actually zero, because the people who are using it are not there to use it. All right? It's a very cryptic answer. I can give you a better answer when we're one-on-one, but not on tape. All right. So let me at least open this up and then start talking about the K2 piece. All right. And then I will jump back inside here and from current slide. All right, let me see how I'm at in time. All right, we're still good. All right, so let's talk about the K2 approach. So, and I'll tell you the story behind it. It's a funny story. If you're a masochist and you like pain. So after doing all of this work in Visual Studio and the client loved it, they said, yeah, it tested well, we love it, great work, great job. They said, guess what? It's a federal agency. The agency that sits on top of this agency purchased software from a vendor and said that thou shalt use this software in everything that you do. No custom solutions, because we want to be able to, when you as the contractor leave our facilities, leave our building, we want to be able to take charge of this and move it forward without having to bring you back in, which is reasonable. It is reasonable, and I agree with that, right? But I wish I would knew that up front. All right. So they said, okay, stop what you're doing. And by the way, up on this, and this is to a credit to their software, up until that time, I've never even seen K2 before. Never even seen it. And they said, you need to build it in K2. So I said, you know what? I need training. So we actually paused the project, and for 2 weeks actually, I went to training. And the training actually was it's a 4-day training, but I needed the rest of the time to do proof of concepts for myself so I can say, yeah, I know how to do it. And luckily, the person who was my trainer is also a fellow speaker. His name is Chris Geyer, and to his credit, plug Chris. But he did a great job, and I was able to take my logic as a part of our training course. I was, even though he's doing his scripted training, which goes through their own stuff, in my back, I was actually trying my own stuff, as my lab. I wasn't doing his lab. I was doing my lab to make sure it works. And in the end, in the end of 4 days, I knew enough that I was able to navigate their tool, understand the objects and things inside their tool, and have a basic, well, I wouldn't say basic. I had a proficiency in getting stuff done. Some of the challenges, however, was how do I still do that parallel approval, which is tricky, but let's go down this process. So create the SharePoint integration workflow activity. So there's a couple different ways that you can do K2. You can do K2 based on events. You can do K2 based on SharePoint integration. You can do it. In fact, K2 gives you so many different ways, even your own ways of adopting things. And so I had the SharePoint integration activity, the events, other event activities such as email activities. Sometimes it's a document library activity. So I want you to look at the document library and see if this changed, then do this. And I also came up to something that was called a smart object. And a smart object is a good and a bad thing, all right? It's a good thing because a smart object can be anything, all right? It ties to any data source. You can give it your own fields. You can write logic against it. It is really, really open. And you can write a lot, you can use it. It's really good. Let's take it from that point. The challenge with it is that it doesn't deploy well between environments. That's one challenge with it. In the version I had, you can challenge me on that, all right? In the lightning rounds. So that's why I have this, I call this on save and export to K2, and remember the version that I'm on too. So,
Which version?
1.6 point something is another. I'll show it to you. It's here in the end. I'll go to help and about. Now, the one thing I like about K2 is that even in 2010, they had the fantastic vision, or maybe even before, of separating the workflow engine from SharePoint, which is what 2013 does, right? Which is a brilliant idea, right? Because you want to take that unit of work out, run it over here so it doesn't affect the farm. And indeed, you can use more functionality from Windows Workflow Foundations, which is the basis of all of this, that you can't do when it's coupled to SharePoint. So I wanted to call that out. And I have this here because of the version I was using at the time. I had to figure out a way to package and deploy the solution and get it across, all right? And as I mentioned right here, that's my qualifier. So let's look at K2. Again, so we've seen the solution so far in Visual Studio. Now we're going to see this inside K2, all right? So let me move this over a little bit. So here's my my smart object called a parallel approval response. And it's basically capturing the process ID, the current user. Let me move this over here. The current user response and the redo pass. So who it is, who has it, how many people there are, did they say yes or they say no, and where am I in my redo? Am I redo 1 or redo 2? All right? So all the same questions I was asking inside my coded solution. And let's open this up here. And we will take a look at the solution. Now, while that's coming up, I will tell you that there is no code was written, or I mean no code. I mean nothing that had to be compiled in K2. I did have to chain together logic. I did have to create a smart object. They do have processes inside there that you can do, if then conditional statements and and all of that good stuff. But you're basically just doing wizards. This is equal to this, so on and so forth. So it's really, really easy to do. And they have a very, very good wizard. I'll try and pop open one right now, actually. That walks you through the step. So as a BA, all right. So here's one. This is actually the first. Is it ready? Remember the first step. Is it ready to move down the hopper? So it comes up here. It has an email already built in. You can customize that email, which is really cool, and you can make use of your metadata fields inside there as well. Here's a good part. You can give it output lines. So what are my actions? Which is really cool inside K2, which gives you the flexibility of having a state machine workflow inside here, because you can drag lines wherever you want it to go and it'll take those paths. In fact, you can drag lines, from one decision to 2 different places and it will take 2 separate paths. Which you may say, why would you need that? There's sometimes a need for that, but I'm just glad that I have the ability to do that without any code. Right? So yes, no, or rework. All right? Then you basically say, these are my outcomes. What's my default outcome? What's my default action? And inside here, how do you get this one to open up again? I'll just open it this way. So inside here, let me do it in advanced mode. You can see more stuff. You basically can tell it how you want it to run. Do I want it to run sequential, all in one line, per slots, and slots are basically units of work. How many slots to create, and also who to assign it to. I was trying to get to that who to assign it to one, which I think I just jumped over. Didn't I? I don't know how to get it. No, I'm not. I'm sorry?
Select the default and select edit.
Select the default and then select edit.
Next.
And then it's here and then edit. Good man.
Just because you're in a
All right. So here I'm identifying the metadata fields for the people who I want to send stuff to. So all of the wizards are similar to this. And as you can see, as long as you can follow instructions, it's really easy to do. And if you have a BA, a business analyst, or a power user, they can, if they have the privileges and the rights, they can use this and really, you can take me, a professional developer, out of the way, right? And you're building it for yourself. So you know your process. Because the first thing I need to do when I go into an organization is understand their process. They already know their process, all right? So that's what happens in K2. And inside K2, a couple things I want to call out as well. Let me see how I'm doing on time. All right. Oh, wow, coming up to my time. I will say this, when as a consumer of this workflow, the way that you can adjudicate it is several different ways. You can actually have emails being sent to you via the task that you're assigned, and you can hit reply and reply back with the responses, and that adjudicates it for you. All right? So that's pretty cool. So you can email a response back and never go into SharePoint. You can also, if you're going to SharePoint, there's web parts that they have that you can say, okay, it follows all the actions, approve, whatever. But it also has these built in, which is delegate, and there's a couple more. Do you remember them offhand? Redirect, exactly. And you as the end user can do that and send it to somewhere else, and it doesn't interrupt the process of the workflow. Whereas if this was maybe in a coded solution, it's this, and that's it, right? You can't extend it beyond that unless you build that in. All right, so I know there's time when, so I'm going to actually jump over now and go to talk to you about now this other approach. Come on, all right. So now, so that's where we are right now with the client. By the way, we're in our end user testing right now, and it is going well, and they're happy again. All right, but I started working with SharePoint 2013. And on my own, I said, you know what? I wonder if this could be done, all right, in 2013. All right? Yeah. All right? So this is to your point now. Now, I basically opened up 2013, and I looked at what was available, which I'm going to talk about later on, and I said I'm going to try it. So the first thing I did was stub out my process using the SharePoint Designer stages. Stages are new to SharePoint Designer 2013, and what stages give you is the benefit of state machines, right? Because you can say, move here, then move here, then move there. And used appropriately, it gives real-time status in the UI for the status fields. Define the transition steps for the stages, and so basically coding the logic to go between that and coming up with the parallel activities. Move down, okay. So let me show you how that works. All right. Okay. So, indeed, actually, I should have done this before. So, all right. While that's coming up, let me go back to my presentation and do that. So from current slides. So when it comes up, I'll show it in real time. But for now, I'm just going to step through some slides. So couple of things is that you have the stages give you a name, and if this field, which is usually default set to yes, as you're looking inside your list, it'll give you real-time updates as it's going through the process. So the default name is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, but if you give them meaningful names and think about what those stages should look like and use them appropriately, they can represent units of works that will be informative to your end users. All right. So couple things. So we talk about stages, and these are your stage names. All right. All right. And then you can also put steps inside those stages to segment that work process out. You also have loops inside there, which is pretty cool now. And because of these new investments in toolings, I actually am a big fan. In fact, as much as I'm a C# snob, I start to do things here as much as possible now, especially because I'm building to the cloud anyway, and I can't do it on-prem. So everything I do, I try to at least come here first and try it. So within the transition stages, you can move between those stages, and that is what represents me now saying, is it approved, and where to send it next, and if it's rejected, where to send it next. All right. Okay. So. Let me see if it's up, designer. What's it? Oh, I have no internet access. Right. So yeah, so we have to talk to it in the abstract. So I will blog this. I think I already have the blog. I just need to publish it, and you'll be able to see what that process looks like. But what I need to do now, because in the interest of time, I need to move a little bit faster. But we're very much at the end anyway. So then now I'm just going to skip to this right here. So I wanted to come up with a matrix to let you know if you're thinking about this either as a developer or a business. I should have asked this question before. As a business analyst, who's in my audience, or as an end user, as a project manager, or whatever. What my opinion. By the way, these are my opinions, and they are some of them are subjective, some of them are objective, based on what I'm measuring right here. This is how I came up in terms of Visual Studio, K2 Solution, and SharePoint Designer. And I'm ranking them with, here's, run away from it very fast or excellent overall experience, all right? There's no ones, obviously. Oh, gosh, don't use that. Don't use that. I'm ranking SPD 2013 as high because it is not a third-party solution, and you can always revisit that later on. K2 solution, I put right behind it. And even me, as a C# snob, I even put this here. I will tell you that because of all this stuff that I had to go through the pains, compared to the rest. Now, if I didn't have any options, these would all be 5s. But because I have an option, I'm telling you, in comparison to the rest, that one is, I would go with that solution first. Testing time, K2 is much, much better because it allows you with K2 Workspace to see a big chart about where things are going in real time, right? Which is excellent. SPD, it's based on how you code those things in the back end. Development time, I give it to here because of the challenges that I faced inside here, and I faced no challenges there. Here, a little bit of a challenge, right? Change management, in the version that I had, I give this right here, because the one thing I like about K2 is that you can run different instances of the workflow at the same time. Obviously, in SharePoint Designer, you can't do that. When you publish it back, that's now your new version, right? You can have other versions out there, but once it what's the word I'm using for kiosk, it's gone. End user experience, good here because of the web parts. Good here because of the workspace. Here, it's based on what you build. Here, again, what you build. And client friendly, I tend to go with this one, but they're all low marks, as you can see right there. So this is my, sorry, go ahead.
There's a row missing for cost. I'm wondering if you look at licensing and consulting time, what went down?
All right, I don't know what the client paid for K2, but because it's a federal agency, I would guarantee that it was a very good price to them. So I'm sure it probably came in if you're looking at it, with sunken costs and everything else, I'm sure this probably wins over this because this is so, it's unreliable in comparison to the rest, right? Here, I think if you could do it, this would obviously win, right? Because then it's just your own human cost. There's no consultancy. There's no third-party product. So, but I think that this, in my example, this won out because it was an enterprise agreement across the organization, and we're just fitting in that one hole. Now, had they just bought it just for that project, then I would say probably not. All right. So I know I'm running out of time. In fact, my time is probably over. I'll take any questions that you have right now.